What to play instead of Dungeons and Dragons? This is the question that most people in the TTRPG community are asking themselves in light of recent OGL news. Or how WASD20 put it 6 months ago,
if D&D 5e were to just magically disappear overnight, what would be my top contenders to replace it?
if you only knew what might actually become a reality. And for those of you who don't know, Wizards of the Coast has recently updated or tried to get rid of the old version of the open gaming license, meaning that everyone who has made third-party content up to this point is now wondering if they can feed their families, because the document that allowed them to do so is now being get rid of by Wizards of the Coast. But I am crossing my fingers that you are watching this video 6 months from now and everything is a-okay. Everything is worked out for D&D creators and you're just looking for another game that you might want to play on a Tuesday night. And lucky for you, there are a ton, as I've reached out to you in the community about other TTRPGs that you guys play, and the response was incredible. So here are all of your favorite alternatives. Let's get into it. We'll start with classic fantasy games, and then family-friendly games, and then apocalyptic, horror, modern, superhero, futuristic, and general games. And we will specifically be talking about games that do not affiliate with the D&D OGL. Hopefully my research does not fail me. Classic fantasy RPGs. Numenera. Using a cipher system we will cover later, this setting is a science fantasy set on Earth approximately 1 billion years into the future. Characters created by their descriptor, type, and focus. This having now a variety of bonus supplements for it. Fantasy Age or Dragon Age. While Dragon Age is very specific to a setting, Fantasy Age is for more of generic stories. The Age is actually standing for Adventure Gaming System, a 3d6 system that's a bit faster and simpler than D&D, with 3 core classes of Mage, Rogue, and Warrior, and then specializations within them. Index Card RPG Master Edition, a very recent one, still using a D20 and fantasy aesthetics, but super rules light for speed, focused on more tools instead of rules for a game master. Very hackable with its flexibility and accessibility to new players. RuneQuest 7th Edition. Set in the mythical world of Gloranthia, characters create their family history and develop physical, mental, and spiritual characteristics. Characters power up, but inexperienced adventurers still have good chances to defeat high-powered enemies with careful planning. This system also inspired Call of Cthulhu, Stormbringer, and ElfQuest by the same company. For the Dungeon, a hapless and more comedic game of fantasy, charging into danger with reckless abandon. Principles taken from Powered by the Apocalypse, which is a system used for many TTRPGs as a 2d6 system. This is a minimal effort play by prompt game. Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Considered the most famous fantasy tabletop game, second only to Dungeons and Dragons. Now, many might say that Pathfinder uses the D&D OGL, however, due to a recent statement by Paizo, that is only the case for 1st edition. 2nd edition only mentions the OGL for the purposes of opening up their content for fair use for others, but going forward, they will be taking the D&D OGL out of their publications, and they are working on an open RPG creative license for themselves. Dungeon World. Another Powered by the Apocalypse based game focused on old school styles and modern rules. Very familiar with their 6 ability scores and character class model. Ironsworn, a cool free option, but also an option to play without a GM or playing it solo. Systems based on a Powered by the Apocalypse to some extent, but you're rolling 2d10 with an extra 1d6 to calculate failures and successes in a dark fantasy leaning setting. Old school essentials. For those who like retro D&D, this was a break-off game of advanced D&D using a new OSR system. OSR standing for Old School Renaissance, still maintaining the classic feel of old games and even being compatible with old modules in many cases. Still maintaining the classic feel of old games and even being compatible with old D&D modules in many cases. Torchbearer. Based on the old school systems, but more of a modern take on OSR, it's another D&D copycat of running into dungeons, fighting monsters, and retrieving forgotten treasures. Though it's not about being a hero, it's about fighting for what you believe. Mazes. This one is another modern challenger to old school rules focused on fast character creation, simplified rules, and minimal prep and setup. Every type of die, a d6, a d8, or d10 for example, all represents different roles in the group, with each player ever using one of them. 7th Sea, a swashbuckling plus sorcery themed game of intrigue, exploration, and adventure in 17th century Earth. A d10 system with traits like brawn, resolve, wits, and panache. Pendragon, a game focused on taking the role of knights performing chivalric deeds in the tradition of Arthurian legend. Adventures often lean on political, military, or spiritual aspects using d20 rolls, but focusing on a BRP system or basic role-playing. Semborum, A dark frontier fantasy where civilization meets the untamed wilds. Where many RPGs are vast worlds, this one focuses in on a fleshed out small region. This system lacks classes with freedom to choose abilities, but also has a 5e conversion if you really want it. Legend of the Five Rings, 5th edition. An empire based on feudal Japan takes influences in many Asian cultures. Here you roll a bunch of dice and choose a set of the results to determine outcomes and traits associated with 4 elemental rings of earth, water, fire, and air. Fabula Ultima, a TTRPG focused on recreating worlds from video games such as Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy. A very Japanese style game with 15 classes rolling different types of dice to determine outcomes depending on how good your character is. Tunnels and Trolls Deluxe Edition. In a setting similar to Tolkien's Middle-earth, characters are given classes, attributes, races, and saving throws much like D&D, but have a luck attribute and the classes are warrior, wizard, rogue, or warrior wizard. Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition, a D100 percentile system that regulates a setting based on the seedy side of society. Where Warhammer 40k is more of a war game known for its large-scale combat, this one takes more of a roleplay focused look on the characters, but still a very deadly system. Family RPGs. Wander Home, a traveling animal folk fantasy game where everyone gets a turn playing the GM, a collective story of traveling pastoral landscapes, a good and simple game for kids and family following prompts and spending tokens you earn through roleplay. Quest, similar in style with filling out characters within the book you choose from roles like transforming into animals or summoning storms. The intention is not to put restrictions on your imagination at all. Tiny Dungeons 2nd edition. Another one great for the family, a book of streamlined mechanics using up to 3d6 dice for actions. Characters all fitting on a 3x5 note card. Included are over a dozen different settings to choose from. Amazing Tales, a no prep story builder for kids as young as 4, being flexible for whatever the imagination conjures up. Be aliens, robots, dinosaurs, fairies, knights, cowboys, or superheroes in 4 different settings the book presents. Apocalyptic RPGs. Apocalypse World, the first powered by the Apocalypse game, where the framework was taken for many other games. Apocalypse World being focused on a post-apocalyptic world containing only an implied setting that you flesh out during character creation. Morkborg, a dark apocalyptic fantasy about lost souls and fools seeking redemption or riches in a bleak and dying world. Another D20 adjacent in the OSR genre with very unique heavy metal aesthetic. Earthdrawn, Age of Legend. Another post-apocalyptic fantasy, but this time hope shines through, with heroes fighting to rebuild a wounded world. Characters choose from a number of fantasy races and roll ascending types of dice depending on their level in a skill. Mutant Year Zero, a more fantastical apocalyptic setting with heavily mutated humanoids and mutant powers. A number of different books are also included to explore different aspects of the world. With its own skill list and unique dice, you are also able to push yourself for more successes, but also more detriments. Forbidden Lands, a more old school feel with the dice pool system where success depends on how many 6s you roll in the pool, with a focus not on heroes and quests, but on raiders and rogues bent on making your mark in a cursed and desolate world. Horror RPGs. World of Darkness, a supernatural horror and intrigue in a goth punk interpretation of the real world, dealing with vampires, werewolves, ghosts, and more. It actually included a number of games within the world, including Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Wraith the Oblivion, Changeling the Dreaming, and so much more in the new iteration, Chronicles of Darkness. Call of Cthulhu 7th edition, an Arthurian-inspired eldritch horror game, also with some pulp noir aesthetics with investigation of the unknown. Definitely among the most popular TTRPGs of all time, using a percentile skill-based system that was originally used in RuneQuest RPG by the same publishers. Shadow of the Demon Lord, a horror fantasy that confronts hordes of demons spilling from the void at the brink of an apocalypse. The players are inflicted with banes and boons as the story progresses, affecting their dice rolls with both a d6 and a d20. 10 Candles, a tragic horror famous for its zero prep system. You play by lighting 10 candles or lights and one by one turn off, acting as a timer to the end of the game. And as tragedies are, it is not a game of winning, for there will be no survivors after being pushed to the brink of madness and despair. Into the Odd, a very interesting rules-light OSR dungeon delving setting with industrial horrors and cosmic strangeness, set kind of in the Industrial Revolution, a short rulebook that brags to have the fastest character generation around. Futuristic Sci-Fi RPGs. Shadowrun 6th edition, an alternate future where cybernetics, magic, and fantasy creatures coexist, combining cyberpunk, urban fantasy, and crime. Having fun with corporate warfare and data theft with cyber sorcerers. Also a D6 skill-based system rather than class-based, but archetypes are given as examples if you want to follow those paths. Blades in the Dark, a game set in the haunted streets of an industrial fantasy setting. All the players gain influence in the underworld in a shared criminal enterprise and roll a number of d6s equal to the points they have assigned to an action, and little distinction between combat and other tasks. Dark Heresy, a TTRPG with the Warhammer roleplay system where you work for an Inquisitor being sent on various missions. Deal with alien threats, gangs, and heresies with 10 different career paths, including Assassin, Psyker, Scum, and Grey Knight. Cyberpunk Red, a dystopian science fiction of a dark future, using a 10-sided die to beat difficulty values of tasks, class-like roles of musicians, bodyguards, hackers, road warriors, doctors, executives, police, and more. Stars Without Numbers, a sandbox sci-fi inspired by the old school Renaissance where players explore the universe in their own starship. They also cover the fantasy genre with Worlds Without Number, which is more of a time-lost setting with ancient secrets. Traveler, literally travel the stars in engaging interstellar exploration and both ground and space battles, played by just the DM and one other player, choosing from human or alien races or something in between, a system that has minigames with character creation that you can actually die in. Trinity Continuum, an alternate history game allowing play of all sorts of science fiction from cyberpunk to Mad Max style apocalypse to space exploration, exploring fascist regimes, bioengineering, psionics, alien contacts, and more. Homeworld Revelations, another space exploration sci-fi where the players are a crew aboard a ship choosing their adventure of Odyssey or re-establishing their home world, containing a fully fleshed out setting itself with its own narrative dice and 2d20 system. Paranoia, a dystopian sci-fi game where a city is controlled by a computer. The game actually leans more in competition between players than a cooperative team game, being encouraged in betrayal while still being lighthearted. Lancer, a unique sci-fi that I would compare to Pacific Rim or other robot piloting genres. Players are given rideable mechs that are modular in their features, each one being completely different from the next. Cyborg, from the creators of Morkborg, you get a similar system in more of a cyberpunk setting, a constant world in flux threatened by ecological catastrophes, society fallout, and capitalist supremacy. Just how many ways can mankind destroy itself? Modern RPGs. Monster Hearts 2nd Edition, werewolves and vampires but make it high school, a role-playing game about the messy lives of teenage monsters, also a powered by the apocalypse system. Kids on Bikes, similar in aesthetics to movies like Stranger Things or It, you have a group of kids in a small town with big mysteries. It uses character tropes instead of stats to inform strengths and weaknesses. The better a person is at something, the more varied any dice roll can be. 2nd edition coming out soon, but also publishing Teens in Space and Kids on Brooms for your more Zathura or Harry Potter adventures. Tales from the Loop, an alternate history set in the 1980s, here lies another option to play teenagers solving spectacular mysteries connected to the Loop, a particle accelerator affecting the nearby town, containing classes like Bookworm, Jock, or Popular Kid. It even has its own TV series on Prime Video and a continuation of the game with Things from the Flood. Monster of the Week, also powered by the apocalypse, immerse yourself in worlds like the X-Files or Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a world where people don't think monsters exist, but you know they do. Hunt monsters weekly to your heart's content. Through the Breach 2nd Edition, players take the role of the Fated, people who have caught glimpses of their destinies in a world of guns and magic. The destinies determine a finite end instead of basically playing forever like any other open world TTRPG. More uniquely, it uses cards instead of dice to determine outcomes. Deadlands Reloaded. Combining Western, horror, and steampunk genres, you get a game based on the Savage Worlds system outlined later. The game uses cards to determine character creation, as well as a mixture of cards, dice, and poker chips throughout play. Feng Shui 2nd Edition, a Chinese action movie role-playing game inspired by the Hong Kong-style action movies or movies starring Jackie Chan or Jet Li, using action values that use a 2d6 to determine boons or banes depending on evens or odds. Superhero RPGs. Marvel Multiverse RPG Playtest. A self-explanatory one as you take on roles of famous superheroes or create entirely new ones, fight well-known villains or create new enemies to fight as well with its 3d6 system. In playtest now with updates to come. Masks a new generation. If Marvel Multiverse are the Avengers, Masks are the young Avengers, or the descendants of the real superheroes that you know and love. It uses a system of 5 labels including Danger, Freak, Savior, Superior, or Mundane that inform your stats and roleplay. City of Mist. Another urban fantasy neo-noir detective game where ordinary people become modern-day reincarnations of myths, gods, and fairy tales, partially based on Powered by the Apocalypse, but there are no stats or numerical values of any kind. Instead, players use special tags and combine them to thematically accomplish your goals. General RPGs. With no default setting, you can have anything from swords and sorcery to spaghetti western, based on the FUD system, which are dice with pluses and minuses and have attributes on an ascending scale. But you can also use coins, playing cards, and other dice to determine outcomes. It is highly customizable. Savage Worlds. This generic system is built for any fantasy, superhero, sci-fi, historical, or any type of story that you want to create. Not using classes, but just attributes and skills instead, with exploding dice mechanics, meaning if a dice is rolled and it lands on a maximum value, the dice gets to be rolled again, adding to the value. Cipher system. Start a campaign in fantasy, horror, sci-fi, or anything with a system taken from Numenera. Generally a rules-light D20 system that focuses on ideas rather than crunchy mechanics. 4 archetypes are reserved for character creation, but are used more as reference than concrete classes. Hero System 6th edition. A point build system based on the concept of special effects. Rules are generated for the reader to decide what they do, using points to pick from a list of different attack powers, defense powers, movement powers, etc. Freeform Universal. Another system focused on descriptors rather than stats. Only the players roll dice, while the GM only focuses on guiding the story, possibly the shortest general RPG with 23 pages. Dice determine a range of outcomes of yes, no, and but. Heroes and Hardship. A skill-based D10 dice pool RPG that will support any setting as well. Detailed with an action point system, offensive and defensive actions, skills, items, wound effects, and bestiaries from multiple different genres. Fandom RPGs. Now there are a ton of different RPGs based on different fandoms and their fan bases. If you know the fandom, you know what you're going to get. We have a Walking Dead RPG, a Doctor Who RPG, a Blade Runner, Firefly, Alien, Fallout, Dune, John Carter, Monty Python, The Witcher, Star Wars, Star Trek, Power Rangers, The One Ring, Conan the Barbarian, or Avatar Legends, each with their own rule sets and exploration of their respective worlds. And these are just examples. There are plenty more out there, and if there's a fandom that you're looking for, just search it on the internet. And there are also many individuals that have announced that they are making TTRPGs now in light of OGL. Creators like Cobalt Press, MCDM, AJ Pickett, Dungeon Coach, DM Dave, and Indestructiboy, just to name a few, all who are trying to improve upon the systems that we know. So you have so many options to choose from. I would just say remember all of the third-party creators who are currently struggling in light of the OGL news and recent decisions by Wizards of the Coast. We are all trying to navigate the new world of TTRPGs. And of course, these are all just quick listings of all these RPGs, so if you want me to go into more detail of any one particular, or if there's any that I've missed, or if you want me to make a video about the OGL affiliated games, please let me know in the comments below and like this video. But in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of TTRPGs and make the world a better place, both on and off the table. See you in the next one.